Hey everybody, thank you so much for tuning in here with another one of my shows from William Wallace for America. Today I'm sitting on a little bench with Daniel Erspamer. Thank you, Daniel, for being on today. I appreciate it.
Great to be with you.
Thank you. We're outside the Capitol, so if you walk up to the Capitol, this is a unique view. Behind me, looks over this shoulder right here is the cornerstone for the Capitol, laid by Huey Long, I think it is, if you get in there and look at it. But with me today, as I introduced here a second ago, is Daniel Erspamer with the Pelican Institute. And what we're going to talk about today is a lot of the bills that are going to the legislature that the Pelican Institute is either supporting or helping or just simply wants to educate people about, because as you know with my show, education I think is one of the most important things to get people involved. Daniel, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. So the last time we did our show, we were on the other side of the Capitol.
That's right.
So today we got to give everybody a different view here outside. But so talk to me a little bit. Let's get to some of these issues that's going on right now.
Yep.
You know, what is the biggest issue that Pelican Institute is working on right now for the people of Louisiana?
So the biggest issue is tax reform, definitely. So from a big picture perspective, as we think about, what is the opportunity here? What's the theme lawmakers should be thinking about? And the way we've put it is it's time to write Louisiana's comeback story.
Yeah.
We've been through oil price falls and COVID and a limping economy coming into this. We've had a lot of challenges, but we have an opportunity today to write that comeback story, and it really starts with simplifying the tax code, and that's where we've put a lot of energy this session.
Sometimes when I'm doing these interviews, ideas come out that we didn't talk about before, but I would love to know where Louisiana was ranked generations ago when it comes to education and everything. And like you said, this is a chance for Louisiana's comeback story, and I love that saying.
Yeah.
Because you're right, when we're ranked 50th, when you get the bottom, the only way is up. But I guess you got to know the right way to get there to move up, and we've been struggling for a long time getting to 49 and 48. What are you guys working on that to get us to those things that you think?
We have. It's been a challenge. You think back even just 50 years ago, 60 years ago, New Orleans, Atlanta, Houston were all kind of sister cities. They're around the same size and prominence, and now, Houston's the fourth largest city in the country. Atlanta's booming, and New Orleans not so much.
Right.
And so, what are the big things? We got to simplify the tax code. It's a huge disincentive to new job creation. I mean, think about if you look across the Southeast, where have the auto plants gone? Have we even ever been on the list for those, right?
Yeah.
Those are going to Alabama and Mississippi and Tennessee and Texas. And we just shouldn't be off that list. We should be at the top of that list. We have access to cheap energy. We have abundant water and some of the most important ports in the world. We have a low cost of living, a great culture that families can thrive. And yet, here we sit. And one last thing worth noting, people are moving more than they ever have before.
Right.
We live in the most mobile workforce, maybe in the history of the world.
Right.
But again, they're not coming to Louisiana, they're coming to Texas and Tennessee and Florida and other places that have a better tax code, that provide a better education, that control the size and scope of government better. The blueprint is not complex. It takes a little bit of courage to get it done.
Yeah, that's a great point when you think about it. Why aren't we bringing more industry here? We've got the Mississippi River runs through that. Granted, it's on that eastern side of our state, but it goes all the way up one side of the state. And on the other side you've got coastline all down below, and we've got a great I said the infrastructure needs some work, but we've got I-10 going. I mean, we have the infrastructure blueprint, if you will, to where we can support business and industry. But when you look at the things that you're talking about, the tax code, education, things like that you all are supporting and you guys are helping, shine a light on, I think that's important to note that the Pelican Institute is shining a light on these issues to help legislators think out of the box on ways to expand our base and improve these things, so we bring business industry here.
Yeah, if you look, there's a statue just over our shoulder over here of Huey Long, and he looms large over this building. And the challenge, one of the biggest challenges we have is, in the sort of long era of government, all roads led to Baton Rouge, right? Everything came through the state, and we're kind of stuck with that legacy. And there's a whole core of lobbyists that are going to be walking in and out of that building who, and I'm nothing against lobbyists,
Right.
but there's a group of them who benefit off the complexity, who don't want anything to change. And so it takes your viewers and folks
Right.
from all around the state coming to tell their lawmakers, we want something different. We see what can happen in Texas. We see what's happening in Tennessee, even Mississippi.
Right.
I always joke, we used to at least count on Mississippi as the butt of our joke.
Exactly.
But alas, it's not anymore. So, how do we get back to that? The only way to do that is to counter those entrenched special interests in that building, and follow that blueprint. We know what works.
But you know what I find, I'm glad you're bringing this up too, is that a lot of people don't realize how easy it is to be involved in this process. We can, people can complain about the lobbyists, they can complain about interest groups, they can complain about whoever they want, but the reality is, you and the audience can walk up that sidewalk right there, check your bags at the door for a security check, and you can go sit on any committee meeting.
That's right.
And you can have the exact same voice as a lobbyist, as a legislator, when you go in front of those committees.
Yep.
To push things like you're talking about. So what's one of the best tax reform bill packages that you see right now that people should get behind?
Yeah. So there's a couple. I don't know, the last count there were 30 or 40 different tax reform bills filed this session. So two to keep an eye on. The first is leadership's package. So the chairman of the two taxing committees in the House and the Senate, so Senator Brett Alam and Representative Stuart Bishop, teamed up to bring a leadership tax package, and so it does a few things that are really important. Louisiana is one of the only states left, I think there are two of us, that still allow citizens to deduct their federal taxes paid from their state taxes. Now, I know that sounds, I'm sure folks are watching saying, well, that sounds like a great idea, a tax deduction. And to some degree it is, but the problem is it ties Louisiana's fiscal fortunes to the federal government.
I've heard about this before. This is interesting because now with the COVID money coming in and the new Biden tax package you're talking about, could take it and actually cost more people more money because of that combination.
Right. So when the Trump tax reform came into effect a few years back, Louisiana taxpayers, because of this deduction, because they were paying less in federal taxes, ended up paying about $350 to $400 million more to the state. So that worked in lawmakers' favors because they didn't have to raise taxes quite as much.
Right.
What's going to happen next if the Biden tax cut increases go into effect? That they're proposing is we could see up to a $500 million hole in the state budget, and I think if we know anything, unfortunately, about the way this building works, they're not going to cut government to make that up. We're going to get a tax bill again. So this is a way to make everybody even Steven. We're going to trade off that kind of complexity for a lower rate. Everyone ends up about the same. And we don't face that uncertainty in the budget.
And what bill is this again now? I'm intentionally repeating it because in case people missed the Stuart Bishop bill with. Yeah.
So this is where the complexity, we've talked about this before, the sin of our tax code is complexity.
Right.
We can argue about too high, too low.
I think you said the sin of our tax
That's
code.
Right.
I like that.
It is. It's, we're about the middle of the pack in terms of tax burden.
Right.
I'd still argue we need to be lower, but the real problem is the complexity of the tax code. The corporate tax code alone has 432 pages of tax preferences and deductions and carve-outs. I like comparisons, so we looked up the King James Version of the Bible. The New Testament is about 184 pages. So if you compare the tax, just the corporate tax preferences is over twice the size of the New Testament.
It's big. They're trying to make it bigger than Jesus.
That's right.
That's a sin in itself.
It sure is. So we've got to make steps toward that complexity, and what that means is, you can broaden the base of taxpayers by eliminating deductions and carve-outs and make everybody on the same playing field.
Right.
And that's ultimately what we're going to go for. I don't know that we'll get all of that this year, but the tax bills that start at least with trading off that deduction for federal taxes paid. So getting to the complexity, there's a package of, I think it's now 3 or 4 bills that'll either be sponsored, depending on which side they started, by Representative Bishop or Senator Alam. So pay attention to those. You can find a lot of this information, by the way, on the Pelican Institute website, pelicaninstitute.org. And I'll mention one other thing on that note. You talk about coming up here to the Capitol and showing up in committee, and if you can do it, do it. You should. If you can't make it here, at the Pelican Institute website, we make it real easy to just click through. If you have a bill that you're interested in or want to look up who your representative or senator are, you can do that right on that website, and within 2 clicks be sending an email to your lawmaker.
I like that. And then also, too, I want to point out is that at legis.la.gov,
That's right.
you can go look up the bill, and then you can actually send in, in addition to that, an email to the committee in support or against.
That's right.
And I like how you say broaden the base, because I like a lot of legislators are talking about actually broadening the base, if you will. And I like the fact that you brought up this time a different way to broaden up the base, which I didn't even think about, which is a lot of legislators talking about broadening the base, meaning bringing people back to Louisiana, business and industry back to Louisiana. But your way also is saying, hey, look, the tax code, if we broaden the base of some people not getting all the exemptions, some people that get more, maybe make it a little bit more even, some pay a little less, some pay a little bit more in some cases. You broaden the base that way too. Did I have that right?
That's right. And I'll tell you, we've run the numbers on this. And if we were to implement the Pelican Institute tax reform package, our estimates suggest we would add over $400 million to the GDP, the gross domestic product, which is the sort of calculation of all of the economic activity in the state, and add something to the effect of 10 to 15,000 new jobs over the next few years. So it's a double up, right? We broaden the base by eliminating complexity and bring more of our friends and family back home to find good quality jobs.
So you see, there is some work going on in this session to be able to help with that. I know that we've talked about some bills in general, but there's some people specifically. I think you mentioned Mark Wright has a bill that's going on right now too.
Mark Rice, Representative Wright, if you're watching from the North Shore, in the Covington area, Representative Wright has a number of really good bills this session. Maybe the most important are in the education space. So Representative Wright has two really important education bills. One allows for what we call public school choice. So if you're in a failing school, you should be able to transfer to a better school within your district.
That's a good idea, right?
And you should be able to choose whatever school. We believe every child in Louisiana should have the opportunity to attend a school that fits them, and that the state dollar should follow that child to the school of their choice. In the meantime, we'll make some steps toward that. So the public school choice bill, and then a second one that we walked here from the committee room, just came out of committee unanimously, is an education savings account for kids that are in the foster system and for military families. So if you think about who might among our citizens need the most flexibility and choice in terms of what kind of education would fit for them, it's kids in the foster system who are going through a lot in their lives.
Exactly.
And military families that are transferring all all over the place.
I guess with all the moving around going on, they should be able to transfer follow their dollars. I mean,
that's right.
After all, if a lot of our tax dollars a lot of the education systems being funded by the federal government, and that's our tax dollars, then maybe our tax dollars should follow around where we choose to go with it.
No question about it. So this is a good first step forward. We've got more work to do, but Representative Wright has been a champion of education reform and been doing some great stuff on that front.
Is that I guess, is there any other education bills that are?
There's another one that's really important, and this is by Representative Rick Edmonds from here in the Baton Rouge area, and it brings transparency to the school district spending.
Okay.
So a couple of years ago, the legislature passed Louisiana checkbook.
Wait, did you say transparency?
Transparency. Can you believe it?
You mean people being able to see where their tax dollars are being spent?
I have this crazy idea that the very least government should do is tell us how they're spending our money.
Exactly.
The least they can do.
You just never know.
And the problem is, local school board budgets are some of the most opaque government spending that we have in the state. We can see what the state is spending, but once those dollars go down into those school districts, they're black holes. Now, you can find it if you have a lawyer and can write a public records request, and you can see what they say they're going to spend the money on. Right. But that's different than what they spent the money on.
Spent it on. We want to see the ledger.
That's right.
We want to see what actually got spent.
So Lafayette Parish has done this proactively, the first parish in the state to bring up their own transparency checkbook, Lafayette checkbook. If you're watching from Lafayette, you can log on to that. And we just think that's the right thing to do for every public dollar that's being spent in education in Louisiana. We should be able to know how those districts are spending our money. Here's the reality. What we know is we spend over $13,000 per kid on public education in Louisiana. That's more than Texas, which spends about $10,000 a kid.
Wow.
Florida is spending around $9,000 a kid. And yet, we pay our teachers less and end up with worse student outcomes.
And we're still number 50.
That's right. So how is it that we're spending more and getting less? Well, the only way to find that out is to see how we're spending
And
the
you
money.
know what's really good about this legislation, and the fact that people can go on legis.la.gov, or they can go to pelicaninstitute.com, and they can see some of these things, is that if we have these transparency types of bills pass, then in today's time, people can go on there, and it's in today's technology world. People can see this, and from their home, they can go on the Pelican Institute, or they can go to legis.la. They can see what's being spent, and they can send their legislators money and say, hey, this shouldn't be here, this should be there.
That's right. It's those voices are so important. And if you talk to any lawmaker, if you haven't met your lawmaker, reach out to him or her.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even if, part of the challenge is a lot of them only hear from us when we're mad at them.
Right.
But it's just as important for them to hear when they're doing the right thing, and just to meet their constituents. That's why they're here to serve. They're here to serve you.
What's moving right now through the legislature?
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about tax reform. We talked about education. A lot of discussion around infrastructure. So, of course, with a little over $3 billion in federal money coming into the state, we've made the case that as many of those dollars as possible should be going to roads and bridges and fixing
one-time
our physical
projects.
infrastructure.
You refer to the COVID money?
That's right.
Right.
That's right. One-time projects only. It's very, very important.
Right.
And a program that doesn't get a whole lot of attention, but should get a lot of focus in these dollars. The department already has a program that brings roads up to standard and then gives them back to the locals. Part of our challenge, part of the reason we've struggled to keep up with infrastructure spending here, we talked about Huey Long's influence.
Right.
The state built a lot of roads when Huey Long was governor.
Yeah.
And so the result of that is we have more roads per capita than more miles per capita than most other states.
See, this is one of these little good nuggets that I love when I do these interviews with people. That was an unknown. We have more miles of roads and bridges than most other states.
That's right. So I think the numbers are, we have the 11th largest number of road miles, state-managed road miles in the country.
Wait, did you say we're 11th?
11th.
So we're almost at the top. We're going to the top already.
That's right. Well, if we want to be on the top of that one.
Exactly.
And yet we're the 18th smallest state in land size. So if you think about that, what it tells you is the state has responsibility to maintain far too many roads. So that means we can't focus state dollars on those state highways. That's most important. So this program, it doesn't cost, it actually gives the locals money for, the mosquitoes coming around.
Yeah, the little gnats. I'm watching them.
It gives the locals money for 40 years of maintenance. So it brings it up. It's a great one-time use of money, and it gets it off the state's rolls moving forward and allows us to focus the transportation dollars.
And what's this legislation that you're talking about for that?
It doesn't require legislation. It's already a program of the Department of Transportation. We just encourage them to double down. This is a great use of those COVID emergency dollars.
So who do they call to say direct some of that COVID money, because I think it's $13 billion coming into the state, to direct some of that money to one-time use roads and bridges, get them all up to par, and then turn them over to the states to use in the regular budget? It sounds like common sense.
That's right. So a few things. Obviously, the Secretary Wilson at the department will have some flexibility over where those dollars go. Certainly, the governor is going to have a lot of influence over where those dollars go. And your local lawmakers. The other person you should call on this is your local government.
Yeah, your local guy.
Ask local government to call and say, we want you, give us that program.
Yeah, exactly.
We want in.
Right, exactly.
It'll bring our roads up to speed much faster.
Right.
And it'll right size state and local government. So lots of folks you can call on this. There's going to be so much money flying around.
Right.
It's so important we keep the heat on. Talk about transparency again.
And that's the other thing. If people start watching and being involved like this, I mean, we're saying common sense, but I like to always repeat the common sense sometimes, because sometimes we don't catch it.
That's right.
And and in a video or on my podcast, but the opportunity right now to let them know you're watching, on one of these sites, but also that you're watching this money, because $13 billion, and a lot of the state reps that I've talked to have the same general feeling that they want to use. They don't want to grow government. They want to use it, but you got to understand there's some legislators in there who want to use that money to grow government, which will put us at the bottom of the list later.
That's right.
But if we use that money responsibly, it's almost kind of like having the chance to be debt free.
That's right.
Not that we're going to be debt free,
Right.
but have a lot of money come in to do all the things that we've always wanted to do, be done with it, and then our tax dollars just go to maintenance, which is far easier and cheaper and responsible.
That's right.
And so the legislation not legislation, but some of the people that are involved in getting this money in the right place.
Yep. And we've got to use this opportunity to make some reform at the department as well. One of the challenges when you or I pay our gas tax, we fill up at the tank. I think our expectation is that's going to pay for roads and bridges, right? The problem is what has transpired over the years is the overhead and salaries and pensions and things that are running the Department of Transportation have gotten taken out of that money. And so we're spending somewhere around, it's a couple $100 million a year on overhead in that department that's not going to roads and bridges, that's coming out of the Transportation Trust Fund. And here's the perhaps the worst part of this is not only it's coming out of the fund, but it's not getting the scrutiny of the Appropriations Committee. So major spending efforts, all the other departments have to come and present their budget and get asked tough questions by those Appropriations Committee members. And what happens over time is, they find some stuff that needs to be sliced away or right-sized.
Would this be the proverbial shell game?
Absolutely.
And using the unfunded liabilities?
Yeah, so it's supposed to be a trust fund to pay for roads and bridges, but several $100 million a year are coming out of that, not paying for roads and bridges. Imagine the impact, especially, a lot of those dollars being matched by money coming from our federal tax dollars. And so $100 million here, $100 million there, as like the old saying goes, pretty soon you're talking about real money. And it's, it's hard to wrap our heads around $100 million, $1 billion. This is not money. But start to think about the impact that can have on our transportation backlog. If you've driven across this bridge over the Mississippi River here, when high traffic times, it sways a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's a little scary.
So imagine, if you will, this money being used for one-time expenses responsibly, but imagine, if you will, that the jobs that are going to be created in the meantime out of it. Now, of course, it's one-time money; it's not growing government. Right. But when you improve our roads and bridges, people are going to have to be hired. Yeah. Okay, they're going to create jobs, and in the meantime, while our infrastructure is being improved, and we bring the business and industry in because we put the right fiscal packages, the right tax packages together, and we made that puzzle of Louisiana look better. There's not as many missing pieces around here. When that money expires, there's going to be other jobs that have moved in Louisiana as a result of that one-time money being spent.
That's absolutely right, and I'll add to that we ought to also be looking at public-private partnerships. There are billions and billions of dollars in the private equity market sitting on the sidelines, ready to be invested in projects. Now, the trade-off to that, right? We can either choose to pay more in gas taxes, or we can pay gas taxes, which is a declining source of revenue. Right. Frankly, it's overburdensome on low-income families. Right. Or we can choose a better option, which is tolling. Now, I know tolling gets a bad rap in some places, but this is an actual user fee. It says, if I'm going to use this road, I'm going to pay for this road. Right. And when they're run by private enterprises, by public-private partnerships, we've seen all over the country. If you've driven in Dallas, or if you've driven in Miami, or all
Florida
over
has them all over the place. As a matter of fact, they just send you a bill.
That's right.
Yeah.
They're really well maintained. They're effective. They get people moving quickly. It's a really good way to fix your roads and bridges, and it's a way to make even better use of scarce taxpayer dollars. Mm-hmm. A very small investment of our taxpayer dollars yields a very large investment from private industry and gets us roads and bridges faster. So all sorts of things to make the best use of this money, and I like to think of twofers and threefers, right? Yeah. And it has a big impact on bringing jobs and bringing families back to here. I'll give an example. In North Carolina, when they fixed their roads and done a lot of the tax reform principles we're talking about here. They went from 45th on the rankings up to the top 20 in terms of their
20 spots.
It's incredible.
And it's not just about having the bragging rights of moving up 20 spots. It's also about what it does for our economy,
That's right.
our and when you can do that when you can make those kind of changes, now you know what works.
That's right. And
we've known we have a long history of what doesn't work.
That's right.
Right.
And North Carolina's booming right now. I mean, they're growing jobs faster. They know what to do with. Not only that, I was speaking to one of their lawmakers recently, and they said they're no longer borrowing for major capital projects. So imagine a world where they're actually using present day dollars
exactly
to pay for all or most of their big capital outlay
Daniel,
projects.
you mean they're living within their means?
They're living within their means. It's
like
crazy
government
idea.
expects us to do.
That's right. You think about the state budget. It's grown in the last 6 or 7 years. It's grown by about 43%.
Okay.
I don't know about you. My personal budget has not grown by 43%.
I wish it would. Yeah, but
and most families and small businesses across the state haven't faced that. And yet, what have we done here? We've continued to spend money. And look, there's a lot that's broken. The whole system of budgeting is broken. One of the other facts I like to point out, in our state constitution, we spend 12,000 words just on how the state ought to spend its money.
Wait, is that now in relation to the King James or the?
Well, so let's compare with the entirety of the United States Constitution, right? The whole U.S. Constitution and its amendments, known as a pretty great document, right?
Exactly.
7,500 words. So we do the entire American experiment in 7,500 words. In our Constitution, just on how they should spend money, about 12,000 words.
And to make the point that 12,000 words, sometimes less is more.
That's right.
But and since it's 12,000 words, they're definitely using that to spend more,
right?
Which has hurt us in the long run.
And it's locking in priorities from 50 years ago. So when these guys walk in, men and women walk into the building. When I vote for a lawmaker, one of the most important things I send them to do is reflect my priorities in spending, right? Well, what's happened is they walk in and they can only change about 11% of the state budget. 89% of that budget is locked up by those 12,000 words in the Constitution and some other statutes.
Right.
And so when we have a dip in the budget or something, there's not that many places they're allowed to cut. And so even if there were the will to scale back the size and scope of government, I'm not sure there is.
Exactly.
But they don't have the tools at their ability to do that because we've hamstrung them in.
Right.
So imagine, again, thinking about a personal household budget.
Right.
Imagine if you had to make ends meet living on a budget that was decided, that 89 or 90% of was decided by your crazy uncle 50 years ago.
Crazy uncle 50 years ago.
We've had a few crazy uncles in Louisiana government.
I don't think we've had a few. I think we've had a lot.
That's right.
But to that point, I always like to make this little nugget here, is that the Capitol has to hire, because of these 12,000 pages or words as you're putting it out, they have to hire a whole team of accountants and attorneys just to decipher not only the bills and the laws and the legislation, but how the money can or cannot be spent based on the laws that are being done. So imagine if we go back to some of this knowledge that you're giving us about focusing on fiscal responsibility, tax reform, making everything more transparent. If we bring that puzzle together, imagine how much better our state will do.
Oh yeah, and here's the thing to remember. It's all within their ability. That we can't do anything about the weather in Louisiana. We're going to have hurricanes, and that's the way that goes.
Exactly.
But pretty much
everything
else,
the bugs flying
that's
around.
Right. But pretty much everything else that's keeping new jobs and new families from coming to our state right now are all in the hands of those men and women in that building right now.
It's all here.
And that's pretty powerful. What that says is we can control our destiny if we choose.
Exactly.
And that's what we have to do, or else we're going to keep languishing at the bottom of all these lists, and we'll never be able to. I've got 4 kids, and I want them to be able to create a life here.
I want to stay here and build a life and be able to say, what I'd like to be able to say, is for our kids to look at you or me and say, now our state's a little bit better because there's people out there who are being outspoken about it and working hard.
Yeah.
So we went over to education transparency. Anything else that you're supporting before I ask you another question?
Nope, those are the major education.
What about just real lightly? There's
Yep.
a coastal lawsuit going on.
Yeah.
This Pelican. When I say because I think it's important for people in a certain parish, so a few parishes actually.
That's right. This is a really big issue that's not getting a whole lot of attention. So a handful of years ago, about 2012, lawsuits were filed by local governments. So government-sponsored lawsuits. Local governments hired contract attorneys to come in and sue largely oil and gas companies who've been operating off the coast. In many cases, those lawsuits allege activity that was done at the direction of, in some cases, and certainly permitted by the federal government in the war effort in the 1930s.
Okay, wow.
Long before any coastal regulations
Yeah.
were envisioned here in the state. The Coastal Zone Management Act was passed in 1979 or 1980.
Right.
So they're alleging all these activities dating back, decades.
Right.
That were before the laws were created.
Exactly.
It's kind of like if you were driving the speed limit. Let's say you're going down the highway at 50 miles an hour, and a couple years later they come change the speed limit to 40 and send you a ticket retroactively.
How'd you know my excuse?
Yeah. So this is a problem, and it's been doubled down now. The legislature is considering two bills. One of the companies that no longer does business in Louisiana has come to the table to settle. And the settlement, I just have to tell you, is a mess. It requires the legislature to create this coastal environmental credit scheme that's like cap and trade, or some of these schemes that have been tried and failed many times over. We'll be releasing a report actually in the next couple of days here on those history of those credit schemes and what they look like.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, what's happening is if they were to pass this bill, what they claim is it would generate $100 million for coastal restoration.
Okay.
The fact of the matter is there's no guarantee it would create any dollars for coastal restoration.
Okay.
And so that's part of what we're trying to make sure we stop. We have to make sure if we want to make a commitment to the coast, let's make a commitment to the coast.
Right.
That doesn't happen by suing the largest job creators, the people who are spending money and time and energy trying to restore the coast. No one's arguing that there's never been a violation, or that everyone's always been a good actor. But the state has it in its power right now, today, if they decided to punish those people who've done the wrong thing.
Amazing! I didn't realize they had that. They had the
laws
power
are
in
already
this.
already there, and unfortunately, what they've decided to do is take on these plaintiffs' lawyers to file these lawsuits. And what we've seen, based on our research, we isolated the impact of the lawsuits. So setting aside the price fluctuations in oil and gas and everything else, and what we found is that each and every year, just because of the lawsuits, Louisiana is losing out on somewhere between $40 and $100 million of economic activity each and every year.
Wow.
And what's really sad is local governments are losing out. They're on the front lines of doing coastal restoration and being a part of this, and they're losing out on revenue because there's no jobs. Nobody's paying the taxes. The drill counts have gone down significantly off the coast compared to federal waters just across that line.
Just across that state line.
So it's not about there not being opportunities there. It's purely about these lawsuits, and we've got to stop them. It's got to end. The government should not be in the business of suing private enterprise. If there's enforcement action to be taken, take it.
Right.
If someone's breaking the law, hold them accountable.
Give them a stiff fine or penalty.
Right.
That may be a little bit easier way to get money into the system, opposed to going to the courts and hiring attorneys and everything. So these are some of these issues are things that people, local governments or people may be on opposite sides of you or the Pelican Institute, or might be on the same side.
Yep.
But these are issues that I think are important, because if we bring more people together that are aware of the issues, then we're able to sit down at a table, a proverbial table, so to speak, and find a solution that works for that government or an industry, to be able to find a way to ultimately, look, I like to point out that, like you said, you have 4 kids.
Yep.
You're not doing this for personal means or vendettas or reasons for or against anybody. You're doing this for the benefit of the future of Louisiana, so we can create a state that's everybody. And and bring more people to the table to help.
Right. Yeah, at the Pelican Institute, our mission is to create a Louisiana where everyone has the opportunity to flourish. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
That's what we want. We want, and I know that sounds kind of big and mushy, but that's the end of the day. Everyone should have the opportunity to flourish. And what happens instead, whether it's the issues we've been talking about or things like occupational licensure or other issues that stand in the way of you or me or our colleagues or friends all around the state, pursuing work, pursuing the dignity of a good job, pursuing new entrepreneurial activities we may not have thought of before.
Exactly right. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's the thing that's hurting a lot of small businesses.
That's right.
Are some of these occupational licensing for small mom and pops, and it basically kind of targets small mom and pops. And while I understand the good intentions, I hate to do the air quotes, but I understand the good intentions of it. Sometimes good intention, that was the road to hell is paved with good intentions,
Sure
I guess, because it hurts a lot of those independent business people. And I like to point out too that what I have found, that many of those people that gets affected by that, some of them have regular jobs.
Yeah.
So not only do they have a regular job making a living,
That's right.
they have a part-time business that not only produces more revenue for them, less dependency on government, but it produces income and opportunity for other people around them in that industry.
Well, think about some of the great enterprises, the things that have created amazing social change and driven technology, Apple and Microsoft, or things like that in the technology world, or Walmart, or just think about, or even the small Etsy, so an opportunity. Almost all of those were started in somebody's garage. They started as a side gig, as an idea. And if you've got government coming to clamp down on that at every moment, those ideas never get off the ground. And Louisiana has one of the worst occupational licensure regimes in all of the country. In fact, the worst on low-income professions. So we're the only state to require a license for florists. We're one of the only states to require a license for interior designers and auctioneers and shampooers, assistant shampooers, actually. All of these things that you should not have to ask the government's permission to be able to do that job. And another great example of this is African hair braiders. This is a skill that's passed down usually from mother to daughter, and on front porch and back porches all over the state.
Right.
But you have to get a cosmetology license for that, which can cost $5,000 to $10,000.
And years of training.
Years of training, and this is something that's a cultural tradition that's passed down, and a chance for entrepreneurs, right? To start a business and create a new life. There's research that shows that higher the occupational licensure burden, the lower the income mobility. So if our goal is to get people to move out of poverty, to create a better life, to pursue the American dream, these are the very rules that are standing in the way of that.
And what's interesting, I want to make this point, and we'll be wrapping up here, is that what's interesting is that government is basically stopping these businesses from being able to start, or they're inhibiting. They're not stopping. They're stopping some. They're stopping some, but they're inhibiting many people from starting their own businesses, where if they release them of these burdens, we would have a lot more people starting businesses, and we would have a lot more people coming to Louisiana because they can do this. But even bigger than that is the government will tax them.
It's right. It's
because
a win-win for everybody.
It goes back to spreading that base.
Yeah.
When you bring in more businesses, or you help create more business, government shouldn't be in the way. It shouldn't be stand in the way.
That's right.
It should pave the way.
That's right.
And when they pave the way, people will pay their tolls.
That's right. Tie it all together. Well done.
Exactly. Well, Daniel, I think we did a great job here today, and I would encourage everybody. It's my videos, of course, on Facebook and YouTube. So you're probably watching it on one of those. But also want to encourage people that I podcast these videos also. So you can go to any podcast app that you might listen to your podcast on, your favorite podcast on, and you can share this podcast, with other people and send it as a way to help to get them to learn not only about the Pelican Institute, how to be involved, but things are going on, not just now in this 2021 legislative session, but also as a blueprint for future sessions on what to look out for.
That's right.
Awesome.
Very good.
Daniel, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure as always.
All right, well, everybody else, have a great day, and please share, like, and subscribe everything, and visit the Pelican Institute before you go. Thank you very much.